I live alone. It's not too bad. It's a life of cycles. There are days when it is great. These days are moments where you're in control of your schedule, when you only do what you want to do, when you set the pace and planning for the activities that occur throughout the day. In these days, you feel genuine freedom and the ability to express yourself however you please. You can talk to yourself casually and make silly impressions to make yourself laugh, or you can think of something funny and laugh hysterically, or you could watch or do anything that you want without scrutiny or judgment. This is what being free is like. These days are incredible. But then, there are the other days. These days are moments when you wake up and everything looks different, even though nothing has changed. You feel this oppressive feeling of loneliness. Everything seems louder, which makes your apartment seem spacious and overwhelming. You feel paranoid and anxious and anticipate for something to happen, leading to uneventful days and sleepless nights. This is what being imprisoned is like. These days are horrible. But as I have said, these come in cycles. The only constant here is that I am alone. With continuous research and media coverage on the common trend of loneliness and social isolation in our current generation, and the effect video games have had on these trends, there have been games, mostly in the indie or low-budget side of the medium, that cover the highs and lows of being truly alone. At the peaks of being alone, the experience can be categorized as blissful and soothing, resulting in a calm experience. Such games include Abzu and Journey, but at the lower points, these games can be best described as claustrophobic. These games include the Silent Hill series, 4 in particular. There's also the shades of grey, ones in which the peaks and troughs of Solitude actually result in a more nuanced outcome. These games include Firewatch, among others. Through these games, a more nuanced understanding of loneliness can be had. Maybe it would clear up this misconception that being alone is not all that bad. Perhaps there is something more to be said about this current generation, which seems to be checking out of society than what the media would like you to believe. Maybe there is a connection, a cycle if you will, for this kind of behavior and the kinds of positive and negative effects it may bring. Feelings of freedom and entrapment, it is, after all, a life of cycles. Being by yourself can be restorative. It can be therapeutic and calming, which allows you to decompress from a long day and appreciate the little things that you may take for granted. A game that allowed me to feel this way in recent memory is Abzu, a game in which you control the eponymous hero of the game, a female diver, and swim through a majestic and colorful world that lies under the sea. Throughout the course of the game, you do not meet any divers to swim with, nor are there any threats or enemies to encounter. It's just you and the aquatic wildlife that is indifferent or accepting of your existence. It is a game of exploration and meditation, a game that makes the recognition of being genuinely alone not a terrifying epiphany, but a soothing embrace. There are other games like this, and one in particular that takes this concept in a different direction, and that game is Journey. Similar to Abzu, the game is built on a foundation of exploration under a comfortable yet desolate atmosphere. However, while Abzu is a single-player experience, Journey offers a cooperative mode of play. This is where an important nuance comes into question. A commonplace misconception is that being alone is a singular experience. But what Journey shows here is that may be the case if you were to play by yourself, but there's also the experience to be had when you are alone with someone else, feeling the same sensation and being alone together. That sensation adds a layer of intimacy that would otherwise be non-existent in games like this. This is why I firmly believe that one needs to play Journey multiple times. One time is not enough. First is with the single-player experience to be alone with yourself, then with other people, namely a close friend or relative or a loved one, to experience the intimacy that comes with only having each other, working for a mutually shared goal. What Abzu and Journey does best here is to allow the player to begin to let go from the typical formula found in video games. With so many objectives and arrows that point you in different directions, encounters barking orders and demands, and with all these challenges and obstacles and enemies to be cleared along the way, these are pervasive in the majority of video games. However, there needs to be a moment to just let go and be at peace, to appreciate the little things, to not get bogged down with stressful obligations and responsibilities, to just be comfortably alone with yourself or with others. These are your good days. But there are moments when those stressful obligations and responsibilities need to be addressed. Perhaps it has to do with one's family, or friends, or relationship. Maybe it is an internal conflict, or an addiction, or an illness. How can Solitude remedy this? The short and unfortunate answer is, it can't. But what it can do is allow you to take a step back and calmly reflect on the issue and to formulate the mitigation steps required to ensure the optimal result. This could backfire, and one could just retreat into themselves and run away from their problems and lock themselves away, hoping that through time, all of these problems would sort themselves out. This conflict can be found through the game Firewatch, in which our protagonist, Henry, retreats from his stressful situations to take on the role of a national forest fire lookout. This role provides him with enough distance to calmly work things out, but due to his inability to accept this responsibility, he begins to become too accustomed to the role, seemingly forgetting where he originally came from, and the inevitability that he will eventually have to come back to the mess he ran away from. He does this by using his role as Firewatch to create conspiracies based on what he finds in the forest. It tries to interconnect a grand narrative from coincidences or benign observations. It is until the game's excellent and purposefully anticlimactic ending that Henry begins to realize that he needs to go back. There are people that need his help. He needs to take responsibility, and he does so. Henry's solitude was originally destructive escapism, but over the course of the game, this escapism grew to a moment of self-actualization, a call to action. The opposite effect is much more akin to the book The Tartar Steppe, in which the protagonist Giovanni Drogo is tasked with guarding a remote outpost in a barren Tartar desert for a potential war that may occur. But in one of the most depressing anticlimaxes in literature, he lets decades pass him by, waiting for this upcoming battle as his old friends are getting married and they're having children and leading fulfilling lives, while he remains in this fort. And when the battle actually arrives, Drogo gets sick, he loses his job, and he dies alone. This is where solitude is destructive. It has a quality of eating away at you if you choose to become encapsulated in it. Potential moments just pass you by and potential opportunities slip away. In the end, potential becomes squandered. Isolation can be self-imposed. That is why the worst moments found in solitude are when you begin to feel more like a prisoner than a person. Silent Hill 4 really sheds unique light on that self-imposed isolation, where you are metaphorically imprisoned from the inside, where you spend the days cooped up in your own apartment, where you're spending your hours looking out the window to see glimpses of the world that you cannot be a part of. Moments where you spy on your neighbors to add some excitement to your life. Moments when you have the opportunity to socialize, but you've been stuck in your head for so long that you have difficulty connecting with anyone else but yourself. This game really spoke to me. Even the little nuances where our protagonist talks to himself in his room, or writes a journal to keep his thoughts together. All of these are just too familiar for me. While I can look at Silent Hill 4 holistically as a survival horror video game, I see this game as a grim reminder of the consequences of living alone, and if unchecked, how isolation could have this gradual process of becoming more dysfunctional and bleak, where you are no longer living, but drifting. It is when you finally close the blinds that you realize how far you've sunk, when you no longer need the world out there because you are comfortable in a world of four walls. It is your little world. It is your prison. These are your bad days. It's a life of cycles, of highs and lows, of bliss and despair. We are living in a world that is being reshaped and reoriented to a new world, a new frontier that greets us when we come home from a long day, that remembers the shows we watch and the games we play, and tries to recommend others to us. It's an entity that serves us, that loves us unconditionally, that essentially loves us for being us. It does not judge our history, it only displays it. It does not judge us for being so reclusive by checking out of a society that seems to be losing more and more people. It does not condemn us for withholding from pursuing great commitments, such as finding love and starting a family. We are exploring a new world, while neglecting a world that we are far too familiar with. We will share our best and worst moments through a screen. We will make lasting friendships and find love through a screen. We will discover profound and life-changing ideas through a screen. And most of all, we will find each other. In the end, we are alone together.